Hey everyone, I'm Laura Owenby. I'm a Platinum Leader with Young Living, and today we are doing a session for our 30-day Feelings Challenge. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit late getting this video to you. We're talking about relationships, specifically community and the idea of trust and how that can affect our emotional wellness. And I did not anticipate how hard this talk was going to be to put together. I have been working on this a good 2 to 3 weeks, and it kind of hit me square in the face. So I want you to know that I've spent a lot of time praying over this, and I want to be very careful to lead you down the right path and to present options to restore your emotional health based on quality relationships. And I want to do it in a way that would honor God. So here we go. I've been wrestling with these ideas, and I narrowed them down to a few specific things. To start with, relationships are really, really hard. It's complicated, right? I think the idea of relationships is where the phrase "it's complicated" really came from. Long ago, I think Adam was in the garden saying, "it's complicated." And the thing is, when we're dealing with other people, we're dealing with the circumstances they're encountering and what we're encountering. We're dealing with personalities. We're dealing with a difference of values. It could be cultural differences, belief differences, faith differences, and relationships are hard. It's hard working with other people on a day-to-day basis. It's hard living with other people, even with you when you love them, right? Let's be honest. So here we go. I'm going to talk about the biggies. Kind of narrowed down to what I think is the source of a lot of emotional turmoil that we encounter when we're dealing specifically with relationships. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that we are called to live in community with other people. And I think that most of us would agree, especially in the United States, that we have come to a point where we really try to isolate ourselves in many ways. And it can be as natural as someone saying, well, I'm an introvert. And I'll be honest, I'm an introvert too. I still love people. I love being around other people. I just recharge in quiet. It has nothing to do with my affection or desire to be around friends. So as an introvert, I have to be very intentional that I am making every effort to live in community with others, because it would feel really natural and comfy for me to stay at home and hunker down and to do things that I love to do at home and work at home. And I laugh and say, you may have heard me talk about how winter is like kryptonite to me. I could really be okay hunkering down at home from November through March. Like I would be okay with that. But we're called to live in community. And that is not just for our sake, but it's for the sake of reaching others and blessing others and being in service to others. And so when we make day-to-day choices that keep us from living in community and genuine relationship with others, we are going to feel less than. We are going to feel as though we are missing something from our lives. And we may not even be aware that that's what it is. It may just feel as though it's an overall feeling of physical illness. We might just feel like we don't have energy, or we might not sleep so great, or we might feel a genuine sense of loneliness. But that is because God wired us up to live in community with others throughout all time. If a human being found himself in the wilderness alone, the chance of him surviving for very long was not so great, right? Just on the idea of survival of the species, man requires living with others. And that's why community has to be a priority. And that may mean that from week to week, you set up different lunch dates, or you set up play dates with your the families for your children. Or you make effort to travel to church, even though it might be easier to watch church online. Now, I'll be honest, there have been times in my own family's recent past, where health required that we had to be able to stay at home and watch online service. And it was an absolute blessing to us. But we had a distinct desire to be back in church with our friends and with our pastors and being able to learn and worship together. And that was very much noticed when we weren't able to do that. So I would really encourage you on a day-to-day basis, make distinct efforts to live in community with others. Now, what if those relationships are not healthy? What if our community at hand has an individual where the relationship is not healthy? It's not good for the emotional wellness. Well, I think that this happens in one of two circumstances. And it's the idea that there's probably some sort of unmet expectation. And it's probably an expectation that we've placed on someone else, and they're not meeting that expectation. There's two types of expectations that you can place on a person. It could be an expectation that's reasonable, and they're really not stepping up to fulfill that expectation, whatever it may be. Or it might be an expectation that's really not reasonable for us to put on that person. And when we see that they're not filling it, then we may feel some sort of resentment or some sort of hurt. So let's talk a little bit about that. If it's an expectation that's totally reasonable, then that person who may not be meeting that expectation, that's a time where we have to have a heartfelt conversation with that person and say, these are the things that I need from this relationship, and work together to grow that. When we do that though, y'all, we have to be aware that it may be something that they are just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually not able to meet. And if that's the case, then that becomes an unreasonable expectation. So for example, I know that there is this idea of true love. And y'all are going to think I'm mean for saying this. Okay, true love, this perfect love. Y'all, I love my husband, I love my children, I love my family, and I know they love me, but I know I'm human, and I'm not nice to be around all the time. And for them to expect that I'm perfect all the time, that would be an unreasonable expectation. And I'm thankful that they show grace for me. So if I am someone who's expecting this sort of perfect love or a perfect relationship, there is only one place that that can come from, and that is of the Lord, y'all. And if we place that expectation on someone, we are going to feel less hurt, resentful, but it's unreasonable. It's an unreasonable expectation, and we have to be able to let that go. And so that's where something like some release oil is going to come in handy. And if you've been paying attention to this series of videos with the 30-day feelings challenge, we've talked about how to use that release oil in the past. So I want you to reference that. So in your day-to-day community, as you're working out and reaching to different relationships, be aware of the expectations that you have and what they may have. And that, I think, is a main source of creating an environment where you and the individual can be emotionally well. Now, I know that sometimes when we feel like it's a reasonable thing to ask and someone doesn't meet that, and it might be that they don't meet it, but they might be that they do something to actually hurt us, like emotionally hurt our feelings. And I know that sometimes there is this human desire and this human need to say, I'm going to cut them out of my life. And I have heard that. And even, y'all, in the church, there is this phrase, ghosting. And that is when friends disappear from other friends' lives. That's when they have cut out friendships. And I want you to think about this. This is something that I think is a key player in the idea of healthy relationships and emotional wellness. Cutting people out of your life is not scriptural. It is not scriptural. That is not of the Lord. God asks for reconciliation. He provides a way for reconciliation to take place, and that's what he would desire of us. So when I feel the human need to say, I'm going to cut them out of my life, then I know that is something that I have to pray about. I need to pray for that person's heart. I need to pray for my heart. I need to pray for a spirit of reconciliation, because that is what God would ask me to do. Now, let's talk about the really hard things. What happens when things are taking place that are really causing hurt? I'm talking things like crime, total injustice, unfairness. Y'all, you do not have to be best friends with everybody. You don't. We're not called to that. We don't have to live in day-to-day community with someone. We're not called or expected to do that. What we are called to do is to have a heart for reconciliation. And that just means that we have offered forgiveness and be able to walk away from that relationship in peace. But that distance can be a good thing. So as I describe this idea of cutting someone out, there are absolutely circumstances where it's not safe to be in that relationship. And that's where there has to be a separation. But we're also just talking about the general, like, oh my gosh, somebody did so-and-so, and I'm so angry about this. We're talking about, the little tips that we get into on a day-to-day basis. We really have a heart to reconcile that. And there's a few oils that can help with that. I'm talking about Harmony oil. And that might be a good one to be diffusing as we approach the holiday season. It smells sweet like Harmony. And you can just put a few drops in your diffuser. And I find that it helps to calm moods and just to provide a sense of peace to the environment where sometimes personalities differ, and it might be more natural to flare up in disagreement than agreement. And so we can use oils like Harmony or Forgiveness for that. All right. In terms of emotional wellness, something that I think is really important to consider for our own emotional wellness is that it's believed that we are most like the average of the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with. So think about, who are the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with? That's what the average of that is what you're most like. So you want to choose those 5 people very carefully. Be careful of who you spend the most time with. There's an old phrase, you are known by the company you keep. That's true. So you want to choose 5 people who love you, who see the best in you, who value the gifts and strengths that you have, who are tolerant and who are capable of forgiveness and living in community. You want to choose people who are going to build you up as opposed to stand in your way from being the best person that you can be. So that's a lot to think about. This is what I've kind of been throwing around in my mind. So again, to review some oils that can be helpful with this: Harmony, Forgiveness, Stress Away. Citrus Fresh is a really great oil for supporting happy mood. It smells sweet and like all those great citrus oils. It's just fun. Also, Humility. There's also a statement about 5 people. If you take any 5 people, it's believed that there's a jerk, and there's actually another word for that, but it's believed that in every 5 people, there's one jerk. So if you look around at the other 4 people and none of them is the jerk, then you probably need to look at yourself and maybe use some humility oil. And also valor. I find that valor gives me a sense of confidence, and sometimes there are things that need to be said in certain relationships. And so valor can be a great oil. You can apply it to the back of your neck or over your heart and pray for wisdom in the words that you choose. And it can be an oil that supports healthy emotions and good relationships, because sometimes there are things that need to be said, and we want you to have confidence in doing that. So there we have it. Relationships, community, trust, and how they relate to your emotional wellness. Thanks for watching, y'all. Take care.